All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome to Ham Radio Nation. I'm K2RCL Russell. So in today's video, this is going to be the first in a couple of different videos that we're going to put together in a series. We're going to build a DMR Hot SPOT for under $50. It's going to be a long video starting out. I'm going to show you how to solder all the components and go through each one as we get into it. So with no further ado, let's get into building. All right, guys, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to head over to Adafruit. That is the easiest and best place to get your Raspberry Pi. We'll come up here to the search engine, and we're going to type in 0W because we are looking for a Raspberry Pi 0W. And as a matter of fact, right here it is. We'll click on this one and pull it up. This is your basic Raspberry Pi Zero. This is the brains of the outfit. You'll see here it's $10. That's all you need. If you've got a micro USB cable, all you're going to need is just a Raspberry Pi Zero. So we'll add that over to the cart. And then we'll jump up here in the cart. And this is where it gets tricky on actually saving some money. You're going to have to wait a little bit for it, but we can do shipping. Once we proceed over to the checkout, it's going to ask me for an email address, things of that nature. So we'll punch that in. All right. So guys, after you've inputted your contact information and your shipping address here, all of that's going to be completed. You come over here and you've got first class service retail. There's no delivery estimate on this, but it's $4.80. So that's going to basically set you up to where you can get your Raspberry Pi for about $15. It's actually going to be probably just a little bit more than 15 bucks. $15.80 what it's going to cost you. Easy enough. You know, that's $15.80 there. From that point, we want to head, and up here in the search bar, we're going to type MMDVM because that's the board we need. So once we hit enter, it's going to pull up some options. Right off the bat here, you're going to see this one, UHF, VHF, MMDVM, hotspot, OLED, antenna case support, does P25 DMR YSF, and fits on the Raspberry Pi B. All right, so we're going to click on that. And what I want to show you here is you can pick these up from about any seller. If you want to buy it from China, you can do that. If you want to buy it from a USA seller like this one, you can do that. But the key thing of it is you'll see these two hats right here. These little terminals right here are the key pieces that you have to have in order to attach this board to the Raspberry Pi. And you'll see that when we get into the video of assembly. It comes with the antenna and it comes with the case, your antenna connector, and your screen. So once you do it, it's $26.70 plus 99-cent shipping, and they'll charge you tax on it. I'll figure it up and I'll put the total on the screen here. All right, guys. So what we've got here is the MMDVM board that we got off of eBay. It comes disassembled, and what we're going to have to do is actually solder the OLED screen onto the board. Now, it took a little bit of research to find out exactly where to put this in, but after looking, you have to put it in the top row, and it goes all the way over as far as it'll go in that top row. Now, there's a header already soldered in, so it's going to go right beside it. And then once you set it in there, those pins just push through the board. That makes it easy to solder in. And you see it just slides in. Now, what you'll find is now the antenna goes into this port right here with the 5 holes. So once it's in there, you can take the cover, you set it down over top of it, and visualize it. It's going to show you that the OLED is in the correct location. So the first thing to do is solder the OLED board in. Now, what we want to do is right now it's touching the lower board. We want to solder it to where it's actually up off the board like that. Now, we're going to get it flipped over, and we'll find something to put up underneath it just to shim it up. Now, that's going to give me the height that I need. in order for this not to touch. I just have to crease this piece of paper down and get it set up under there. And there we go. Now, everything's set and level. We're ready to start soldering into place. Get the soldering tool. I'm going to put just a little bit of solder on the tip. And then we're going to solder that first terminal in. Now, you want to be careful on these things because you don't want to damage the board. You just start applying a little bit of heat to it. And as it starts to heat up, you have to keep an eye on it. As soon as that solder starts to flow into that pinhole, you want to pull the heat off of it and let it set. Now, I don't have quite enough solder on the tip of my tool here, so I'm just going to set it in, and then I'm just going to lightly touch this wire solder to it. That's it. Just a little bit. Leave the heat on it so that it puddles in, and then let it go. Now, before I solder any more of them in place, I'm going to check and make sure that the spacing is correct on my OLED screen. I don't want it touching the board, so now's the time to make any adjustments that need to be made. I'm a little bit twisted, so I'm just going to flex it just a little and get everything spaced up just like it needs to be. And now we'll just step in, solder the other 3 pins in place, and we'll be good to go on to the next step. All right, so we've got our OLED soldered onto the board. You can see the pins sticking through. We've got a nice little bead of solder in each hole. So it's secured and setting up off the board just like we need it to do it. Now, it should fit inside the case really well. So the next thing is we've got to solder this antenna in. Basically, it's got 5 pins. It's got 4 outers and a center. So we're going to set it right in, and each one of the terminals have to be soldered independently. So now that we've got it flipped over, I'm going to use my little tin can here and level the board up so I can get this first joint soldered in, and I want it to stay nice and flush. So we're going to do the one in the center. I'm going to start applying heat to it. Now, these tabs are a little bit thicker than the others, so they may require just a little bit more heat. But again, you just don't want to heat it up just enough to get the solder to flow into the hole. And then as soon as that little puddle drops into that hole, back the heat off of it. Now, we just got to go through and solder the other 4 because we've got the center one done. That's going to hold everything in place. We solder the other 4 pins in place, and that'll have us good to go. All right, there we go. We've got our antenna connector soldered on. Our screen is on, and that tells us that we are done doing anything with the MMDVM board. We're going to set it to the side and get our Raspberry Pi board, for which what we'll have to do now is solder the terminals onto it and actually set the headers. Now these go all the way to the ends, makes it relatively easy to install. You don't have to count any pins or anything like that. You just set them in there. Once those are soldered in, this will just simply push down right on top of it. And we verify the alignment just by setting it in place. So now we'll flip it over and get ready to start soldering these in. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder one pin on each connector. That's going to hold them onto the board. And you see me go off camera there. I've done that a couple of times, but I'm just cleaning the tip on my solder tool. I like to keep it nice and clean so I don't have to worry about any buildup or goopy, goppy solder building up on the board or anything like that. I only want to apply what little bit that I melt into those. But now that I've got both of them soldered in place, we've just got to solder the rest of the pins, and we'll do each one at a time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder this one on this side, and then I'm going to move to the other header. And I'll alternate back and forth on the sides and try to alternate from sides on the connector so I don't apply too much heat to the board in one specific place. All we're wanting to do is just apply enough heat for the solder to melt into place and bond to the board. All right, so we are soldering our last pins in place. And once that's done, we'll have the Raspberry Pi board built. But something I want to point out and talk about is keeping your soldering iron clean. Again, we talked about wiping it off. What I'm going to do now is actually wipe. I'm going to open up my tip tinning, and I'm going to stick the tip of my soldering tool down in there and basically recoat the end of this soldering tool. What this is going to do is prevent it from oxidizing. I don't want that tip to get oxidation on it. Once it does that, it just does not function and work properly after that. So I stuck it in there, got a little bit of tip tinning on it, let it melt in place, wipe the excess off, set it to the side, and let it cool. So now we'll bring our MMDVM board back in. We've got our headers soldered in place, our screen soldered on, the antenna connector soldered in. We are done with the soldering. All we got to do is put it together. And that's the easy part. We just line the pins up. And there it is, put together. Now you have just built yourself a DMR Hot SPOT. Now it's built, it's not programmed yet. So what we're going to do next is go ahead and put it in the case. That way we don't have to worry about damaging anything. The kit that you buy comes with 4 screws and 2 spacers. You're going to get 2 short screws and 2 plastic spacers. That basically allows you to screw the Raspberry Pi down to the case itself with the 2 short screws, and then use the longer screws with the spacer to support the board on the opposite side from the header. Now we're just going to use a small Phillips head screwdriver. And what I'm going to do to assemble this is I'm actually going to disassemble the DVM board from the Pi and set the Pi board in. Now your 2 short screws are going to go up close to the headers that we soldered onto the Raspberry Pi, because again, they support themselves once they're locked together. And don't go cranking down on these things. You just want to snug them down. This is like building a computer. You got to be delicate with these boards. You don't want to break it. You don't want to crack it, because any type of damage to it can stop the circuit from continuation through it. All right. So now we'll reinstall our DVM board onto our Pi. And really we just line up the pins and slide it in place. So now we'll install our longer screws with our spacers. Just usually put them in kind of at an angle just to get them started into the spacer, and then maneuver the spacer in between the 2 boards and line the screw up for the hole at the bottom. Now I'm not going to tighten this one all the way down. I'm just going to snug it down to a point where it just holds everything in place, and that gives me enough wiggle room to get this other one started and installed on the other side. This one on this side, I'll just go ahead and screw it all the way in and go ahead and snug it down. And then I'll go back and snug the one on the other side. Now we're going to slide our cover down in place. You just have to keep in mind this thing has to be spread apart just a little bit, and it's a little aggravating to line up. And that's because it has the little tabs that stick out that you have to get it past. You might have to use a small screwdriver or something to that extent just to flex it enough to get it down over there. And also keep in mind you have to get it down over the micro SD ports where they plug in. That radio does great on DMR. There's multiple code plugs out there. So what we're going to do is in the next video, we're going to take you through the Pi-Star setup to get this thing up and going. And then we're going to take you through the DVM calibration to figure out what your frequency offset is to get this thing set to where it communicates with the radio properly. We'll also go in and see if we can't do some type of radio programming video. Everybody has their own code plug for their own area, so it's hard for me to cover the whole aspect of it, but we can definitely get you set up with at least like a worldwide channel or something to that extent. You can get on DMR and start playing around with it and enjoy yourself. This little thing has been great so far. We've made several contacts and had a really good time with it. So I want you to stick with us. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get notified when we release the update videos on this thing. Give us a thumbs up. Drop comments or questions down below. Guys, as always, thank you for watching. All right, guys, so there you go. That is building a DMR Hot SPOT for less than $50. I think we came out 45 and some change. You could spend extra money on shipping if you wanted to and get your parts quicker that way. And that's up to you. I'm trying to show you the most economical way that you can possibly get into DMR with a hotspot. Now, we've got the Anytone 878 here. We got it programmed. I've done an unboxing video on it. I'll drop a link up here for you for that video. That radio does great on DMR. There's multiple code plugs out there. So what we're going to do is in the next video, we're going to take you through the Pi-Star setup to get this thing up and going. And then we're going to take you through the DVM calibration to figure out what your frequency offset is to get this thing set to where it communicates with the radio properly. We'll also go in and see if we can't do some type of radio programming video. Everybody has their own code plug for their own area, so it's hard for me to cover the whole aspect of it. But we can definitely get you set up with at least like a worldwide channel or something to that extent. You can get on DMR and start playing around with it and enjoy yourself. This little thing has been great so far. We've made several contacts and had a really good time with it. So I want you to stick with us. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get notified when we release the update videos on this thing. Give us a thumbs up, drop comments or questions down below. Guys, as always, thank you for watching.